With a brand new set of storylines for its 11th season that's going to elevate the show even more, it's hard to believe that there are some viewers out there who have a few issues with the TV series. From dropped storylines to new character arcs, in this video, we'll talk about the most unpopular opinions about Chicago Fire and what Chicago Fire does better than any other show. Let's get started. First up, we'll talk about the unnecessary focus on Gabby Dawson. While Gabby Dawson was a supremely popular character on the show, not everyone loved the Gabby-focused storylines for the major part of the series. Sure, he was revered for her abilities to overcome the most difficult of situations and for her relationship with Matt Casey and how it kept most of us on the edge multiple times, thinking about them in a will they, won't they sort of way. But at the end of the day, it could sometimes feel like the Gabby show, and by the time Matt and Gabby finally got together, it was all that was happening. While some audiences may have loved the Matt and Gabby romance storyline, we think it really needed something fresh well before it was wrapped up. Up next, is Stella Kidd likable? The short answer is no. Sorry for that, Stella, but trust us, we have our reasons. We won't argue about the fact most people believe she's got one of the best character arcs on Chicago Fire, but sometimes she kinda just rubs us the wrong way. Know what I mean? While she's bounced back from several enduring episodes in her life, from finally becoming an officer in the Chicago Fire Department to getting away from her abusive ex, it just all feels a little meh. For us, there's just not enough depth to her character, and we don't think her storyline will likely go anywhere interesting soon. Moving on to too much romance. Okay, you might be thinking, who in the world complains about romance? And you might be a little bit right, but there is a thing as too much romance, isn't there? Most of the show's characters spent much of the season trying to fight their feelings for each other, which adds up to the sexual chemistry in the air and provides for a wholesome moment when they do end up together. Despite that, sometimes it feels like it's become too much of a pivotal moment in the show, and while most fans look forward to the romance aspect, we feel like sometimes it could go on the back burner while we focus on the real intense fire stuff. Now, the side stories don't really work. In the last couple of years and the seasons of the show, we've seen some of the characters move on to taking odd jobs here and there or even hobbies, which somehow became a part of the show's storyline. While it's supposed to make the characters seem more human and a lot more relatable, we're kind of over the side stories. Yawn. The show is called Chicago Fire. We want to see more of the action and less of these side gigs that add no real value to the main plot. At this point, we'd rather watch the guys go grocery shopping together. Let's talk about Otis. You're probably going to hate us for this one, but we'll risk it. There's something seriously off about Otis. Otis was easily one of the most popular characters on the show, and while his death gave us one of the most emotional scenes in the history of the Chicago Fire, we just don't get the hype. Sure, he provided the comic relief and was the guy that everyone was friends with, but at the risk of sounding awful, so what? There's no real value in his character other than being the unlikely hero, and his jokes weren't always that funny. He just felt like that extra random character sometimes that didn't get any lead roles, but just had to be included in the show, like being the director's nephew or something. What's more, while we're on the topic of hateable characters, another character that most people had strong opinions about was Chili. She was incredibly unlikable for the fans since she often puts her fellow medics in dangerous situations and was very combative when it came to her superiors. Longtime fans of the show breathed a sigh of relief when she left the series since it felt like a weight was being lifted off, releasing all that tension. But we don't feel the same way. While it may have seemed like she had very few redeeming qualities, there's something about her character which seems interesting and adds to the show. Her sour attitude might not have been the best, but a slight twist was added to the show thanks to her. Now, speaking of characters, let's move on to Matt Casey. Since the very first episode of Chicago Fire, Matt Casey has been at the very core of the show. With every passing character on the TV series, we've seen how Casey was affected in one way or another. It not only made him sympathetic, but also drove his ambitions higher. He's always been the ambassador for doing things right, making him a real hero in the eyes of many fans. With that being said, his empathetic personality can be a bit much sometimes. Sure, he's a great guy and he's not a bad person per se, but it can all be a little intense, especially when we see other characters die on the show. Next, we've had enough of this one romance. At the moment, one of the show's main storylines revolves around Violet and Galio's possible romance and whether they can make the relationship work by just being friends or will they eventually become romantically linked. In the past, since we've seen most of the main characters being paired together, the idea of Galio and Violet ending up together seems pretty exciting for most of the fans of the show. But not everybody is feeling the love, including us, and we just think this hookup is kinda getting old news. The show needs to find other areas of focus so we can move on from this tired romance. Now, Shay died, but it's kinda okay. Most of the time when a character is killed off on a show, unless they're the villain, most fans would be sad and emotional and try to process this turmoil. Leslie Shay was a popular character on the show, and fans most enjoyed her friendship with Severide, so when she was killed, it felt like they had lost a friend. Now, we don't particularly feel the same way. Most people would tell you that she shouldn't have died, but we think killing off Shay was absolutely the right thing to do, but the timing wasn't great. Given that when she died, Severed and her weren't exactly on the best of terms, so the fans didn't want to see her go, but we guess the writers had a different direction in mind. They should have given it another couple of episodes to transition the end of that storyline, and it wouldn't have been so jarring. Following up with Stella and Severide, one of the best and longest storylines on the show have been about Stella Kidd and Kelly Severide building their relationship from scratch. From becoming friends and turning into lovers and finally getting married, their love story was never linear, which kept us all super invested in this dynamic, but not everyone is a fan of this pairing. Some social media users have pointed out that Kelly has had a better relationship with every single woman he's been with except Stella. Yikes. Now, before Stella, Severide has had 2 serious relationships on the show, so it might be hard to determine whether this comparison is true or not. But do we think the two are the right match for each other? We have our doubts. Let's take a minute to talk about the show. The fall finale of Chicago Fire delivered us one of the most stunning cinematic sequences we've seen in the history of TV, and it emphasized what the show does better than any other TV series right now. In the finale, a motorcyclist ran the gate on an elevated bridge as it was rising. Talk about bad timing, and he was stuck on an almost vertical incline, clinging onto the bridge for dear life with his bike perfectly poised to fall right on top of him, leading to his death. Luckily, Squad 3 and Truck 81 were there to rescue him, and we saw Severide climb the bridge and swing over the edge to shimmy himself down while Kidd worked alongside to get the aerial in position. The man was saved through a series of practical stunts, and actor Taylor Kinney did most of the stunt himself. Coming up, what did the showrunners think? Showrunners Derek Haas and Andrea Newman believe this is primarily why the NBC show beats everyone else when it comes to pulling off incredible stunt work. While Kinney and the stunt performers weren't in any real danger during that bridge sequence during the finale, the Fire team still found a way to film it without removing that very real sense of anticipation and dread, like something was about to go very wrong. Now, the stakes on the show feel extremely sky high, and that's primarily thanks to the larger-than-life stunt sequences, instead of doing stunts completely fabricated with special effects, which most people nowadays wouldn't shy away from doing. Now, a lot of shows nowadays can pull something like that off, let alone have one of its lead characters doing most of his own stunts. Finally, even the crew was scared. Haas claimed that even the entire film crew knew exactly how the stunt would end and were nervous watching the entire thing unfold. He said that he's not trying to disparage any other show since everybody is working hard in the industry trying to create something magical, but he truly feels they're a step above the rest and doing the stunts better than anyone. He also clarified that while the show is relatively safe, it was scary to shoot on a bridge that was basically open with everyone 50 feet or so up in the air, dangling from a bunch of ropes. That being on the edge of your seat feeling was what they were trying to capture and recreate for the audiences, and well, we think they did a phenomenal job. That's a wrap for this video. Do you have any thoughts about these unpopular opinions about Chicago Fire? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.